Electromagnetic signals can and will go directly, if possible, and is the lowest resistant route. When you see it, it has reached you directly. Ohmospherical waves, all sides, must reach observer coming from a source. We create a direct line between cause and reaction that must be there because we actually see both cause and effect. Yet its nature is ohmospherical. In all directions, from one source, at the same time, a continuous pulse from a center. Gravity acts omnidirectional, in space. All is equally weightless, yet masses vary. Temperature is what makes them, particles / masses / shapes, variable. Temperature makes mass its weight, relative, on the most single, undecidable, tiniest of scale possible, a variable. Each particle, each atom has its own sphere of influence on a scale we can or cannot see. It has its own dominant center of gravity pulling, its nucleus that holds it in its sphere of influence, in its grasp, creating a magnetic invisible, low movement velocities, particle flow and a shell with a different than outside of its dimension environment, and between absolute points in space. Energy is movement of mass, containing temperature, flowing in a 6D weightless, inert, direction between absolute points in 6D space dictated by temperature contained, and must be useful for humans, to be considered energy, and nature's natural balance between them creating natural distance from most dominant local mass in the influenced sphere. G acts in spherical, space, and egg-shaped. Earth has more fall as dominant mass is closer below us, would fall up if most dominant mass was up as well, and is sometimes weightless in space. Thus temperature is most evenly spread out spherically, thus fast loss of visibility, ways. Space is the 0th state of mass, the beginning of anything. No velocity, thus inert, small, thus easy influenceable and hard to see, no temperature, thus no expansion and no push, no mass to pull or attract. Until you add temperature. The more temperature, the more visibility of movement which is even needed to actually tell time. Light is violent movement of particles inside atoms that become visible by micro / aero friction. Mass and temperature are both properties of one thing on all scales. Temperature wants to rise up. Temperature wants out, rest, seeks space to lose energy in until its own preferred state is reached, for it to exist. Mass wants to fall down, after the natural balance between these is found naturally. The result is a gravitational balance between the push, temperature, and the pull, on one particle / atom / combined shape / mass. Thus distance from the most dominant mass or that's on the actor BB boom Elf of our masses are equals in absolute particle count and outer pressure on the mass. None of both masses have more foothold by absolute friction area. The more homogeneous the masses, the less influence one has over the other. The bigger the difference between two masses, the more effect we see visually. We are easily held to the surface of Earth, for instance. Only when we use temperature for lift, can we escape gravity's pull on our own mass. We want to leave the surface in space. Atoms' shells, or zones of influence of their own core are spherical because of weightlessness. Spherical is less friction, and easy loss of temperature on all sides equally. On Earth we see the effect of gravity much more evidently. But the shells are egg-shaped as mass falls to its own scale center or dominant mass. The faster the spin inside, the more visible it is. It literally light massed and light thus visible. A lighter particle can move faster and is thus results in a more visible system. Up until our human limit for realization, a particle can move so fast, it can pass our field of view entirely before we can realize what it is we see. Visual information is lost by high velocity, and a too slow velocity results in too little friction on impact or between friction areas to light up. Both sides of the visual spectrum have their own reason for not being visible to humans. Time is no thing, it is an agreement of mankind. We need movement between two objects or one and a visible background to tell time. In space all is dark/black, no movement can be seen other than your own or another object, and masses are only seen very locally. From a distance you don't see anything but darkness. Remember the song, Black Hole Sun, Sudgadi, we bring time to space ourselves, we pick up a rock from its natural resting place with intention. If the surface was not there, it would have fallen much deeper to the dominant mass or Earth's core. We take mass from its natural balance and have a purpose for this. Nature wants nothing more than rest in place. Nature knows no time or no zones. Once you float in outer space, you can pick any country with a time so to land, and you then adjust your perspective's time to the local. The pull on mass is weaker than the possible push force by temperature. A magnetic lock or pull on mass can be broken with more thrust up. When we leave the atmosphere, we have overcome gravity to become equally weightless as all other mass in space. There is a correct reference frame, namely the one that has a pilot with a consciousness and a need. And in absence of a pilot, it's the perspective of nature we must see from. There is no time in space, nature knows no time, or no time zones. Humans bring their notion of time to space, it is a human agreement. When we float in space we can pick wherever we wish to land, in whatever time zone, and we adjust our notion of time to match the other humans in this zone's time. When we move to find a new civilization, they too will have time, yet not based on the movement of our sun around our planet, but based on their sun and their planet. Time is no thing, time is movement of two objects, or one object and a background. Space is dark on dark so you can't tell time there, plus time doesn't matter to anything there beyond us humans who need it as a tool to compare two things and see the duration this movement takes on our human time scale we invented. Consciousness brings the notion of time with us to space, and from space to other planets. Temperature makes mass it weight, to humans, relative. After the balance is found we see the effect of the balance between the two properties of mass that can't be separated. In any mass, there is its own atmosphere around it, its own zone of influence, its own gravitational system, its own balance to the core based on its contained temperature and mass. Each separate particle has its own G-center, its own dominant mass that acts on its own scale. All particles are magnetic in a way, when pulled forward/influenced by something much bigger forward/heavier mass. Temperature is divided over mass and the result is G natural balance, or distance to the dominant mass pulling on it. More room and 1 degree of temperature Celsius has less effect on the mass total shape. Less room, and the same degree of temperature Celsius will have a much bigger effect, more visible to humans. We can't weight masses in space, because we took a known mass up there and calibrated the scale to tell us the same thing we are told on Earth. We don't notice that mass in cold space is as heavy as it can possibly get relatively by low to no energy inside the atoms, to make them visible to humans. Too little actual area to hold T in, will remain invisible forever, as it cannot produce enough energy in its absolute semi-fixed because incoming waves can be super fast and space is slow movement itself. We just can't see black on black, no background is no visible movement, position in space, to ever produce enough light we need to see, unless you move through it very fast to create friction enough to become visible to humans. Comets, falling stars, disks. Visual information is lost over distance, period. Atmospheric fog is also in space, only so fine you can still see great distances. When we look from inside an elliptical lens to the outside of it, everything on the outside will look elliptical visually. Seen from inside a egg-shaped elliptical lens, all perfect spherical orbits seem elliptical visually. The egg shape works as multiple fluid lenses acting seamlessly as one. This effect distorts our vision and seems to warp space-time optically, while only the information, or the image, is warped by light itself. We can't compare because all we have is local light. Far space telescopes can do it, not Earth surface based, and local light close and nothing but dark in between. Light itself is spooky action at a distance because we don't see what happens to the image in between. Space is room containing mass in it that in turn contains temperature in it. Nature does not care if we can see it or not. Einstein never thought about the egg shape getting bigger by global warming. Our Earth scale remains the same, yet projections seem smaller and smaller in comparison to our own scale here on the surface. That did not change. We think the universe expands, but it is more logical that it is our screen that got bigger by global warming. Now that NASA said we are getting colder again, and the ice on Antarctica is growing back, the atmosphere will also shrink, making the universe seem to shrink with it. Mark my words, science will discover the universe shrinks soon. Yet it is only visually. Science thinks from the human perspective, while we should look from nature's perspective itself.